Welcome back, guys, to another video. Today I wanted to talk about video game preservation and how important it is to me and to each and every one of you collectors out there. So I have a bunch of stuff on the table here next to me that I wanted to talk about. And yeah, thank you very much for tuning in today. So let's see. So first up, I want to talk about so I mean, physical media started, I mean, it's been around for 100 years, right? Almost. I mean, they had those horn record player things or whatever. So I think you could put in like different cartridges. And that would play the music on those big, like, you know, those horn things. And yeah, so those were like the first, you know, sort of like physical media devices, right? And, you know, here we are in 2025, and, you know, things are starting to disappear. People are talking about all digital, you know, and like they're not going to make, you know, physical video games anymore. I mean, they're still making CDs. Not as popular. I think vinyl's more popular right now, so that's a good thing that physical music media, as far as records, is becoming more popular, and CDs are sort of making a comeback, but I wouldn't say as much as records. But yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. All the different types of physical media and what they mean to me, and how important it is for each and every one of you collectors out there to try to preserve as much of what's left out there, because eventually, you know, the less and less of something, the more valuable it becomes, which is not really a bad thing, but at the same time, the more you save of stuff, the more stuff, you know, in like 50 years, how many copies of Super Mario World are going to disappear? Right? I mean, they made so many copies for the Super Nintendo out of, of the Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo. I mean, it's probably got to be the #1 produced game for the Super Nintendo, right? So, but in 50 years, how many more copies are going to end up in the dump? You know, how many are really going to be left by then? There'll still be a lot, but not as many as the years go by, right? And so anyways, like I said, I got this pile of stuff here, and I wanted to start off first with my very first record. So this is my very, very first record that I've ever bought. I think, yeah, this is my very first record. I was at the thrift store, my local Salvation Army, and yeah. So, and I don't have a record player yet, and but yeah. So, and I love rock music. I'm a pretty diverse person when it comes to music, and but yeah, I think rock is probably my favorite, and punk rock and metal, you know, but I like all shades of music, all different genres. I don't discriminate. So I mean, I grew up in the 80s, early 80s, and you know, we had VHS. So this is a rare VHS. This is The Wizard. Came out in, I believe, it says 1989. I'm not really sure about the year on this when it came out. I think it's 89. That seems correct, actually. This is an original copy of The Wizard, and this introduced Super Mario Brothers 3 for the very first time to America. It was already out in Japan at the time. So, but this movie right here is just such an awesome, great VHS tape, and it's valuable. This is about a 50, in this condition, this is 50 to 60 to $70 tape right here. And a lot of the ones you find on eBay, I actually got this one from Canada. And so, you know, it's important to put this stuff away. So I had it in that protector, you know, and this was a cult following, so there's really not a lot of copies of this VHS tape. And, you know, for all the newer people that are 20 years younger than me that didn't grow up on VHS, this is what we grew up on back in the 80s and early 90s, and then sort of got phased out by like, 2000. I think the very first DVD was Twister, actually, right? So that's what I've come to my knowledge anyway. Twister was the very first. So, but yeah, if you haven't seen The Wizard, you need to go see The Wizard, especially if you're into, retro video games, all that and stuff. Honestly, a lot of people say this. I like the story. I like the whole thing. I think it's an excellent movie. They say it's just a promotional movie for Nintendo, which it sort of was, but I think it's great. So let's keep it rolling here. So I got another VHS. I mean, so then, video games took off in the 90s. And, so they got so big that people decided to start making movies about them. Mortal Kombat was absolutely huge back in the 1990s. This came out in, what does it say here? Let's see. It says somewhere on there. I want to say 96, 97. I don't know. Anyways, let me know down in the comments when this came out, if anybody knows. I think it's around that time. But yeah, I mean, and so this particular VHS was sitting in someone's house on a shelf, and it'd probably been sitting there for probably like 20 years, because the ones that I got seem like they've been sitting a long time. I actually had to clean this one up, and you can see what happens to the stickers over time on the VHS tapes. So they kind of get that weird, like, saturation of the adhesive on the back. You can kind of see it, but I was able to clean this up. I've been able to save quite a few VHS tapes by cleaning them up. But this was a big deal when it came out, and still a great movie today. I highly recommend going to see it, or renting it, or picking up a VHS tape, preferably, and put it away and save it. So I got one more VHS tape here, and this is the Terminator Collection letterbox version. So this is 1 and 2 Terminator. It's got 2 VHSs in it. And you know what? VHS isn't hard to get into. It takes up space, which is the main thing, but it's not very expensive. There are some collectible VHSs, like the Wizard one I just showed you back there. But yeah. So then, there we go. 1 and 2. So I started collecting. Well, I still have my original VHS collection back in the States. So probably got about 40 tapes, 50 tapes back in the States, and they've been sitting there for 20 years. They're probably still good though. But yeah, so yeah, VHS is a great media, and I absolutely love enjoying collecting VHS. I have to be more selectable because, like I said, it takes up a lot of space. So and then we got the original Nintendo cartridges. We got the original Nintendo cartridges from back in the 89 or 1985, I should say. This one said, I think this came out a year after the Nintendo launched or whatever, 1985. So yeah, this I mean, you had Atari, but nothing grabbed a hold of Americans like the Nintendo, the original NES did. And this thing is so nostalgic, these cartridges, and this is physical media right here. It's in one of its truest forms, and keeping these clean and putting them away and keeping them nice, and this could last easily, I would say, as long as you keep it in a good place, safe, 50, 100 years, and I don't see why it wouldn't still be relevant and fun, and so next up, we got Game Boy. I mean, Game Boy was, it's just, right after the Nintendo came out, Game Boy came out. And they were able to put, video games on these little teeny tiny cartridges. Not as tiny as a Switch, but, back then that was teeny tiny, back in the 90s. Yeah. So, and then we got, the next generation that came after the NES and the Game Boy was Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. Sega Genesis, yep. And so, you can see here that they were kind of going, you can see it's smaller. So I always thought it was cool how Sega Genesis actually, were trying to go for that more futuristic kind of compact, look for the, it made their boards smaller, made the cartridges smaller, more compact. I like the look of the Super Nintendo cartridge though, way more. So yeah, these are the early, some of the early, 1980s and 1990, physical medias that we had. And here's Castlevania on the Game Boy Advance. So this is basically a Super Nintendo game, but look at that. As time went on, they were able to cram a Super Nintendo games into a cartridge that big. And I think that's absolutely amazing. Wouldn't it be crazy if we had a Super Nintendo where you put it in like this? And those were the Super Nintendo cartridges. Because this is about a little bit bigger. If you put two Switch cartridges together, it would be just still a little tiny bit bigger. But, anyways, and then we went from cartridges, and then from records, we went to 8-tracks, which I don't have any 8-tracks. Never really been into 8-tracks. 8-tracks really weren't around too long because this is what replaced them. And I absolutely love Motley Crue. I'm a big music fan. I absolutely love music. And it's always been a big part of my life. And I don't know if anybody can tell by the title of my channel, but by the title of my channel, it's Misfit Chris Rules. So when I was in high school, music was huge. I mean, Limp Bizkit came out, Korn was big, Slipknot, and but Misfits were super popular. I think I fell in love more with the logo than I did with the than I did the actual band, and then I learned to love the band later. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the Misfits, and so that was one of my very first favorite punk rock bands that I still love to this day, and I think they're just great. And if you haven't listened to the Misfits, go listen to the freaking Misfits. Trying to keep it PG around here, got to keep it PG. You never know if the kids are watching. So let's see next, and then after the cartridges, we graduated to discs. And so there was going to be the combo unit, the Super Nintendo with PlayStation, right? So that would have been kind of like the first thing. Or then, you had the Sega CD, and I think the Sega CD, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that was actually around that time or before it, right around the same time or right before it. So I think the Sega CD actually was the first CD-based game. And so most of those games, they weren't graphically better, but they had digital audio on them. So that was freaking awesome. So like Sonic CD sounded freaking awesome with that digital audio. I never had a Sega CD growing. I had a Sega CDX, but it didn't work. I did a whole video. So if you want to check out my video on the Sega CDX, I'll leave a link in the description to that video. So anyways, then we had the PlayStation, and then we had the Dreamcast. After that, well, was it the Dreamcast? No, it was the Saturn. So we had the Sega Saturn actually after that. But anyways, so then we got into CD-based games, and better graphics, and you were able to fit more information on a CD. And there was all different types of formats of CDs, and CDs been around since the 80s, right? So, you were hot stuff back in the 80s if you had a CD player. So then we got back. I actually got this copy of Marvel vs. Capcom, brand new sealed, for only $100, which is actually a good deal if it's sealed. I had a crack though. I replaced this jewel case front. So I mean, if it hadn't had a crack on it, I've never graded a game, but if I do grade a game, it's not going to be for the value, and I probably wouldn't sell it. It would be to preserve it, to encase it, for me, like as a trophy, like on my wall, So a lot of people think that, you know, grading games, people, you know, a lot of them are. They're just trying to make money. But for me personally, if I grade something, like out of my video game collection, like it's probably going to be to just preserve, you know, if I have like duplicates of something, you know, it would make sense to grade it and sell it, I guess, you know, because you don't, I mean, I'm good with duplicates, but you know, when I was a kid, you know, I collected baseball cards all the way up until I was a teenager, you know. So, you know, anytime I had duplicates, I would trade them, you know, or whatever. But, and then, you know, we from tapes, we went to CDs, you know, and I remember buying this CD. This is not my original copy. I remember buying this in a Hot Topic. And Hot Topic was a great place back in the 90s, early 2000s, still alive. Hot Topic still around to get physical media when I was growing up. And yeah, so I actually bought this, not this particular copy, but I bought this CD in Hot Topic. And this is a great compilation. I loved this CD so much that I actually got this woman tattooed on me. The guitar is different. I put a Gibson Flying V. I kind of almost wish that I kept that guitar instead of the one that I added when I got it tattooed. But yeah, so and I just think this is such a great, you know, compilation that came out. The Return of Rock. You got the Ultimate New Rock, a compilation, new music from Korn, Kid Rock, Static X, plus current tracks from Slipknot, Stain, POD, Papa Roach, Kitty, Powerman 5000, and more. So you know that's 2000s right there, early 2000s. What does it say? It says 2000 Roadrunner Records is what it says. So it's awesome. It's awesome. If you can find a copy, they actually made it a second one. It's not as good. If you can find a copy of this, and you love rock, like 2000s rock, I would highly recommend to get a copy of it. So, and then we had the GameCube come out, and we got discs like this. So I thought that was a trip at the time. Very, very interesting. These little teeny tiny, less than half the size of a regular CD based game. So I think this put some limitations, like, you know, like they weren't able to fit as much video, but this was the first time that Nintendo went to disc-based games. And you know, and now I just, for preservation purposes, CDs are only going to last so long, right? So you know, I think that's why Nintendo went back to the Switch. I mean, that's not why they went back to the Switch cartridges. I think that's just Nintendo being Nintendo, wanting to be different. And it's crazy that they're on cartridges and everyone else is CD based. So, but disc rot is a real thing. So you really, if you're gonna try to save CDs and games discs, you really, like here on Guam, it's humid. And so if this room I was in wasn't air conditioned, all these games would disc rot probably within a year, and there'd be pinholes or whatever. And I mean, I've had some CDs since I was like in my early teens, 16, you know, 13, and most of those are gone. Most of those have deteriorated and died. And so yeah, I mean, and so we got, like, you know, here's a physical media device, Sega Nomad, you know, back from in the, you know, the late 90s, you know, and this, you know, this is how we would play our physical media back in the 90s. And this is, you know, and I don't want this to go away. You know, I don't want this kind of stuff to, I mean, you know, in 50 years, how many Sega Nomads will be left, you know? So saving this stuff and putting it away and enjoying it, you know? So I don't believe anything should just be on a shelf and looked at. I mean, unless it's like a statue. But if it has a function, you should use it. You know, I mean, everyone's got their own personal opinions, and I'm not knocking on anybody that, you know, wants to put things up and just stare at them. Some people, that's just the way they are, you know. And, you know, for me, like, as a collector of physical media, like, I do buy a few things and I don't use them, but for the most part, I you know, I make sure that I try to use everything that I buy for my collection if it has a purpose. And And then so here we are. We had we had the Sega Nomad, but then basically 24 years later, there's the Sega Nomad, and then here's the Steam Deck. And so this is kind of where we're at now. I mean, and then we got, here we are with Xbox, early 2000s, still disc based, and here we are. And this came out, what, 2 years ago? So we're still got discs, but they are disappearing. And I really hope that everyone's not right about, about physical media going away, more and more. But so now we got this, and this is absolutely amazing. This is a Steam Deck, and most of you watching probably know what a Steam Deck is. And it's really cool. It's really cool to have this. You can play just about any system on a Steam Deck. And you can emulate almost any game, and the Steam Deck emulates beautifully. You can play your Sega Genesis, you can play your Dreamcast, you can play your GameCube, you can play your 64, 60, so none of them are like perfect, but some of them are really, really good. Like some of the emulators you use to play PS2 on the Steam Deck are excellent emulators. I mean, you can't even tell you're playing on an emulator, really. So, and then we also got a great company by the name of Analog. I've done a couple of short videos on my channel. If you want to go check those out on the Super NT and the Mega. I don't know if I did one on the Mega SG. I did one on this though. I did one on that. I did a whole video on the Analog Pocket. So Analog is a really cool company. They have some flaws and stuff, not with their product, but with the way that they limit, and when you go to buy it, it's difficult to get them or whatever. But they just came out with, they're trying to preserve and make games so they can play on regular flat screen TVs, so that because when you try to play old games on old hardware on new TVs, it just doesn't work out too good. They have all kinds of upscalers, all this and that and everything. But the whole thing with Analog is that it's not emulation, it's like hardware based, so I'm a big fan of Analog, and they're not cheap, so it's more for the serious collectors. You're better off buying cheaper options like a Retron 5 or something if you're just getting into collecting physical media. That's a great way to start off getting your physical media collection. If you want to start getting into retro games particularly, I would highly recommend a Retron 5. They don't emulate perfectly, but they emulate well enough to where you can have a lot of fun, and to the more serious, collectors, players, you might, you're going to notice those little hiccups in the system, which really, even though I consider myself semi-serious collector, I love to collect, but I know a lot of people that are a lot crazier and collect a lot bigger and a lot heavier than me. I'm always out to get the best deal, the cheapest deal. I've recently, in the past few years, kind of gone up a little bit and started buying some more expensive, more collector-ish type stuff, when I got the money for it. But Retron 5 is excellent. It plays Game Boy, or Game Boy Advance, Sega Genesis, NES, Super Famicom, and Super Nintendo, right? So you got a pretty wide field of systems there that you can buy games for, and you're not spending for each system, because each system, Sega Genesis, I think, are a little more cheaper than NES and Super Nintendo. They're all kind of in the same ballpark, right? Super Nintendo, you get all that, you can get all those for like 100 or under 100. But like I said, the Retron 5 is a great way to kind of replace all those or to get started. The main thing with collecting physical media, the great thing about is that it takes up space, but it fills my heart knowing to be able to, and it's a lot of that nostalgia and being able to relive the stuff that you had when you were young, and but yeah. So anyways, I just wanted to share my thoughts and opinions on physical media. I see a lot of other people, expressing their thoughts and opinions. I thought it was important to express my own about the way that I felt about physical media. So anyways, if you guys like this video, please leave a thumbs up. And don't forget to, comment down in the comment section and like and subscribe and all that good stuff or whatever. And thank you guys for joining me on this video today. And I will catch you guys on the next one.